Maya Rodriguez stepped off the bus at Camp Thunder Ridge with her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, her heart pounding with nervous excitement. The military training facility stretched before her like a small city, with barracks lined up in perfect rows and drill sergeants barking orders in the distance. At 22, she had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl watching her grandfather's old war movies. The other recruits around her looked confident and eager, chatting loudly about their expectations and sharing stories from back home. Maya kept quiet, adjusting the long sleeves of her uniform to make sure they covered her arms completely. She had learned long ago that first impressions mattered, and she wasn't ready to show the world what lay hidden beneath the fabric. Sergeant Williams, a stern woman in her 40s with steel-gray eyes, appeared before the group like a storm cloud. Her voice cut through the morning air as she divided the recruits into groups. Maya found herself assigned to Squad Delta, alongside 7 other young women who would become her bunkmates and training partners for the next 12 weeks. As they marched toward their assigned barracks, Maya couldn't help but notice the curious glances from her squad mates. Jessica, a tall blonde from Texas, whispered something to her friend Sarah, and they both looked back at Maya with raised eyebrows. Maya pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the rhythm of their boots hitting the pavement. The first week passed in a blur of early morning wake-up calls, physical training, and classroom instruction. Maya threw herself into every activity with determination, proving herself capable during obstacle courses and excelling in tactical discussions. But despite her efforts, she noticed the distance her squad mates maintained around her. During their 3rd evening in the barracks, as the women sat around polishing their boots and sharing stories, the conversation turned to tattoos. Jessica rolled up her sleeve to show off a small butterfly on her wrist, while Sarah displayed a delicate rose behind her ear. One by one, each woman shared their ink, laughing about the stories behind each piece. When eyes turned to Maya, she simply shook her head and said she didn't have any tattoos. The lie came easily, but it created an invisible wall between her and the others. They began to see her as boring, too conservative, maybe even afraid to take risks. In their minds, someone without tattoos was someone who played life too safe for military service. The teasing started small. Jessica would make comments about Maya being too pure for their squad. Sarah would joke that Maya probably asked her mother for permission before making any decisions. The other women laughed along, not realizing how deeply their words cut. Maya endured it all in silence, telling herself that their opinions didn't matter as long as she performed well in training. But as the days turned into weeks, the comments became more frequent and more pointed. During mealtimes, they would discuss weekend plans to get matching tattoos, deliberately excluding Maya from the conversation. When they practiced combat techniques, they would pair up with each other, leaving Maya to work with whoever was left over. Maya's isolation grew deeper with each passing day. She would lie in her bunk at night, listening to her squad mates whisper and laugh together, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. The irony wasn't lost on her that the very thing they teased her for lacking was actually covering every inch of her back in the most beautiful and meaningful way possible. She had gotten her first tattoo at 18, a small symbol representing her grandmother's strength during difficult times. Over the next 4 years, she had carefully planned and added to the design, creating a masterpiece that told the story of her family's journey from Mexico to America, her grandfather's military service, and her own dreams of following in his footsteps. The artwork stretched from her shoulders to her lower back, featuring an intricate design of an eagle soaring over mountain peaks, with delicate roses and meaningful symbols woven throughout. Each element had been carefully chosen and placed by a master artist who had become like a second father to her. The tattoo represented everything she held dear, everything she was fighting for. But Maya had learned to keep this part of herself hidden. Growing up in a conservative family, she knew that her parents would never understand her choice to decorate her body with permanent art. She had also heard enough stories about workplace discrimination to know that visible tattoos could limit her opportunities in the military, so she wore long sleeves whenever possible, changed clothes quickly in private, and showered early in the morning or late at night when the bathroom was empty. Her squad mates assumed she was just modest, not knowing that she was protecting something beautiful and deeply personal. As their training intensified, the divide between Maya and her squad grew wider. They saw her solitary nature as arrogance rather than protection. They interpreted her quietness as judgment rather than caution. And with each passing day, Maya wondered if she had made the right choice in joining the military at all. The morning of their first major field exercise arrived with gray clouds and the promise of rain. Squad Delta would spend 3 days in the wilderness, testing everything they had learned about survival, teamwork, and leadership. Maya packed her gear carefully, checking and double-checking every item while her squad mates chatted excitedly about the challenge ahead. As they boarded the transport truck that would take them to the training site, Maya caught Sergeant Williams watching her with an unreadable expression. For a moment, their eyes met, and Maya wondered if their squad leader had noticed the tension within their group. But the moment passed quickly, and soon they were bouncing along dirt roads toward their destination. Little did Maya know that this field exercise would change everything, forcing her to make a choice between protecting her secret and protecting her squad mates. The test of their training was about to begin, and Maya would soon discover that sometimes the greatest courage comes from showing your true self to the world. The wilderness training site looked like something from a survival movie, with dense forests stretching in every direction and a small clearing where their temporary base camp had been established. Squad Delta unloaded their gear under the watchful eye of Sergeant Williams, who explained the rules of their 3-day exercise. They would be tested on navigation, shelter building, food procurement, and emergency response scenarios. Most importantly, they would be evaluated on how well they worked together as a team. Maya felt her stomach tighten at those words, knowing how fractured their group dynamics had become over the past month. The first challenge came within hours of their arrival. Sergeant Williams presented them with a map and compass, pointing to a location 3 miles away where they needed to retrieve a supply cache before sunset. The catch was that they had to work in pairs, and Maya found herself partnered with Jessica, the ringleader of the teasing campaign. As they set off through the forest, Jessica made no effort to hide her displeasure with the pairing. She walked several steps ahead of Maya, checking the compass with exaggerated sighs and making comments about how she hoped Maya wouldn't slow them down. Maya remained focused on their mission, using her natural sense of direction to help navigate the challenging terrain. When they reached a steep ravine that blocked their path, Jessica immediately began looking for a way around it, adding precious time to their journey. Maya studied the rocky walls and spotted a series of natural handholds that would allow them to climb down safely. She suggested the route, but Jessica dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "I'm not taking advice from someone who's afraid to take risks," Jessica snapped. "You probably never did anything adventurous before joining the military." Maya bit back her response, knowing that arguing would only make their situation worse. Instead, she followed Jessica on the longer route around the ravine, watching precious daylight slip away with each detour. By the time they reached the supply cache, the sun was already setting, and they were the last pair to arrive back at camp. That night around the campfire, the other squad mates shared stories of their navigation challenges. Jessica loudly blamed their late arrival on Maya's overly cautious approach, painting herself as the victim of an incompetent partner. Maya sat quietly on the outskirts of the circle, poking at the fire with a stick while the others laughed at Jessica's exaggerated retelling. Sarah joined in with her own commentary about Maya's risk-averse personality, suggesting that maybe Maya wasn't cut out for military life after all. The comment stung, but Maya had learned to endure. Much worse growing up in a rough neighborhood, where showing weakness could be dangerous. What bothered her more than the words was the way her squad mates seemed to bond over their shared criticism of her. She could see them forming a tighter group, united in their belief that Maya was the weak link that would hold them back. The isolation felt heavier here in the wilderness, surrounded by darkness and the sounds of nocturnal creatures. The second day brought a new challenge that would test their individual survival skills. Each recruit was given a different scenario to handle alone, simulating real-world emergencies they might face in the field. Maya drew the scenario of treating a wounded soldier while under simulated enemy fire. The exercise required her to low-crawl across rough terrain to reach the injured mannequin, assess its wounds, and provide appropriate medical care while staying hidden from instructors playing the role of enemy scouts. Maya approached the challenge with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else. As she crawled through the underbrush, her uniform caught on thorny branches and rough bark. She felt the fabric of her long-sleeved shirt tear at the shoulder, but she couldn't stop to assess the damage. The exercise was being timed, and failure would result in points being deducted from her overall evaluation. When she reached the mannequin, Maya quickly identified the simulated wounds and began applying the appropriate first aid techniques she had learned in class. Her movements were confident and sure, drawing on knowledge she had gained not just from military training, but from years of helping her grandmother care for injured neighbors in their community. As she worked, Maya became aware of voices nearby. The other recruits had finished their own exercises and were watching her performance from a safe distance. She could hear Jessica making snide comments about how long Maya was taking, suggesting that her perfectionist approach would get real soldiers killed in combat. The criticism only motivated Maya to work faster while maintaining her precision. She completed the exercise in record time, earning praise from the instructing sergeant for her thorough and professional approach to emergency medical care. But even this success couldn't penetrate the wall of negative opinion her squad mates had built around her. That evening, as they prepared their second campsite, Maya volunteered to gather firewood while the others set up their shelters. She was grateful for any excuse to spend time away from the group, finding peace in the quiet forest where she didn't have to endure constant judgment. As she collected fallen branches, Maya allowed herself to think about her grandfather, who had served 3 tours in Vietnam before returning home to build a successful construction business. He had always told her that the military would test not just her physical strength, but her character, and that the greatest battles she would face might come from her own comrades rather than any enemy. When Maya returned to camp with an armload of dry wood, she found her squad mates huddled together in serious discussion. They fell silent as she approached, their guilty expressions making it clear they had been talking about her. Jessica quickly resumed normal conversation, but the damage was already done. As Maya arranged the firewood for their evening meal preparation, she overheard Sarah whispering to another squad mate about how Maya always seemed to separate herself from the group. They interpreted her quiet nature as arrogance, her self-reliance as antisocial behavior, and her dedication to excellence as an attempt to make them look bad. The misunderstandings were piling up like storm clouds, and Maya could feel the pressure building toward some kind of confrontation. She had hoped that proving herself through performance would be enough to earn their respect, but it seemed that her squad mates had made up their minds about who she was, based on surface impressions and unfounded assumptions. Later that night, as Maya lay in her sleeping bag staring up at the stars through the forest canopy, she made a decision that would change everything. She realized that continuing to hide parts of herself wasn't protecting her at all. Instead, it was creating barriers that prevented real connections and authentic relationships. The third day of their exercise would bring the ultimate test of teamwork and trust. Maya didn't know it yet, but circumstances would soon force her to choose between maintaining her carefully constructed privacy and stepping up to lead her squad through their greatest challenge yet. The moment of truth was approaching faster than anyone could have imagined. The third morning of their wilderness exercise began with an unexpected emergency that no one saw coming. Maya woke before dawn to the sound of Sarah crying out in pain from her sleeping bag. When she rushed over to help, she found Sarah clutching her ankle, her face pale with agony and tears streaming down her cheeks. During the night, Sarah had gotten up to use the bathroom and stepped wrong on the uneven ground, severely twisting her ankle in a hidden depression near their campsite. The joint was already swelling to twice its normal size, and Sarah couldn't put any weight on it without crying out in pain. Jessica and the other squad mates gathered around, their usual confidence replaced by genuine concern for their injured teammate. They had learned basic first aid in training, but this was their first real emergency and panic was starting to set in. Jessica fumbled with the medical supplies, her hands shaking as she tried to remember the proper procedure for treating sprains. Maya assessed the situation quickly and calmly. Sarah's ankle was badly injured but not broken, and they were still 6 miles from the nearest road where they could signal for help. The radio they had been given was for extreme emergencies only, and using it would result in their entire squad failing the exercise. Without hesitation, Maya took charge of the situation. She gently moved Jessica aside and knelt beside Sarah, her voice steady and reassuring as she explained what she needed to do. Maya had treated similar injuries before when neighborhood kids got hurt playing soccer in the streets near her home. As Maya began wrapping Sarah's ankle with an elastic bandage, She gave clear instructions to the other squad mates. Jessica was assigned to prepare a makeshift stretcher using tent poles and a sleeping bag. 2 other recruits were tasked with packing all essential gear, while the remaining squad mates prepared to help carry supplies and equipment. The injured ankle needed to be elevated and iced, but they had no ice in the wilderness. Maya remembered a technique her grandfather had taught her from his military days. She sent 2 recruits to find a nearby stream and soak bandages in the cold water, then wrap them around the injury to reduce swelling and provide some pain relief. As Maya worked, her torn sleeve from the previous day's exercise flapped open, revealing glimpses of colorful artwork on her shoulder. Jessica noticed at first, her eyes widening with surprise, but she was too focused on helping Sarah to say anything about it in the moment. The plan Maya developed was ambitious and risky. Instead of using the radio to call for rescue, which would end their training exercise in failure, she proposed that they work together to carry Sarah back to base camp. The journey would take most of the day, requiring them to take turns supporting Sarah's weight and navigating difficult terrain as a coordinated team. At first, some squad mates protested that the plan was too dangerous. They argued that Sarah's injury was serious enough to warrant calling for immediate medical evacuation. But Sarah herself, despite her pain, begged them to try Maya's plan first. She had worked too hard to get into this training program to fail because of a twisted ankle. Maya's natural leadership abilities emerged as she organized their evacuation plan. She divided the squad into rotating teams, with 2 people supporting Sarah at all times while others carried the extra gear and supplies. She mapped out rest stops where they could reassess Sarah's condition and adjust their strategy if needed. As they began their journey back to base camp, Maya's torn sleeve continued to cause problems. The fabric caught on branches and kept sliding down her arm, revealing more of her tattoo with each snag. She tried to adjust it discreetly, but the damage to the uniform made it impossible to keep her artwork completely hidden. The trek through the forest was grueling. Sarah, despite her brave front, was in considerable pain with each step. The makeshift stretcher worked for short distances, but the uneven terrain made it difficult to carry for long periods. Maya rotated between helping support Sarah directly and scouting ahead to find the safest path through the wilderness. About halfway through their journey, they encountered a steep hill that would be nearly impossible to navigate while carrying an injured person. Maya studied the terrain carefully, looking for alternatives, when she noticed a game trail that wound around the hillside at a gentler angle. The detour would add an extra hour to their journey, but it would be much safer for Sarah and easier for the team to manage. Maya explained her reasoning to the group, and even Jessica had to admit that the alternative route made sense. For the first time since training began, Maya felt like her squad mates were actually listening to her ideas with respect rather than skepticism. As they followed the game trail, Maya found herself walking directly behind Sarah and Jessica, who were discussing her torn uniform in hushed tones. Jessica mentioned seeing colorful designs on Maya's shoulder and speculated about what kind of tattoo might be hidden under her clothing. Sarah, despite her pain, was curious too. She had assumed Maya was too conservative and rule-following to have any body art, and the glimpses of color on her skin didn't match the image they had constructed of her personality. The revelation was making them reconsider their assumptions about their quiet squadmate. When they stopped for their next rest break, Maya noticed her squadmates stealing glances at her damaged sleeve. The torn fabric had shifted enough to reveal a portion of an intricate rose design with detailed shading and vibrant colors. The artwork was clearly professional work, not the simple designs that some of their squadmates had shown off earlier in training. Jessica, unable to contain her curiosity any longer, finally asked Maya directly about her tattoo. Maya's first instinct was to deflect the question or make up an excuse, but something about the genuine interest in Jessica's voice made her pause. These women had seen her step up in a crisis, take charge of a difficult situation, and put Sarah's well-being ahead of her own comfort. Maya realized that this moment represented a turning point. She could continue hiding parts of herself and remain isolated from her squadmates, or she could take a risk and show them who she really was beneath the careful facade she had maintained throughout their training. The decision she made next would not only change how her squadmates saw her, but it would also transform the dynamics of their entire squad in ways none of them could have predicted. As Maya looked at the faces of her teammates, all focused on her with new curiosity and growing respect, she knew that the time for hiding was coming to an end. Maya looked around at her squad mates, all of whom were waiting for her response to Jessica's question about her tattoo. Sarah was leaning against a fallen log, her injured ankle elevated, but her eyes were bright with curiosity. The other recruits had formed a semicircle during their rest break, and Maya realized this was the most attention they had paid to her since training began. Taking a deep breath, Maya made a decision that went against every instinct she had developed over the past month. Instead of deflecting or changing the subject, she carefully rolled up her torn sleeve to reveal more of the artwork on her shoulder. The intricate rose design was even more detailed than they had glimpsed before, with delicate petals that seemed to shimmer with life and thorns that looked sharp enough to draw blood. "I got this piece done 2 years ago," Maya said quietly, her voice steady despite the vulnerability she felt. "It represents my grandmother, Rosa, who raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. The silence that followed her revelation was different from the uncomfortable quiet that had characterized so many of their previous interactions. This silence was filled with surprise, respect, and a growing understanding that they had completely misjudged their squadmate. Jessica, who had been the most vocal critic of Maya's supposed lack of tattoos, stared at the artwork with genuine amazement. "Maya, this is incredible work. I mean, this isn't just a tattoo, it's like a piece of fine art. How could you let us think you didn't have any ink?" Maya felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and regret. "I learned early that people make assumptions about you based on visible tattoos. I didn't want anyone to judge me before they got to know me, so I just kept them covered. I guess I kept them covered so well that you all thought I was too scared or conservative to have any." Sarah shifted her position to get a better look at the rose design, temporarily forgetting about her injured ankle. "There's more, isn't there? I mean, no one gets work that detailed and stops with just one piece." Maya nodded, suddenly feeling like a dam was about to burst after holding back so much for so long. "There's a lot more. The rose is just one part of a much larger piece that covers most of my back. Each element tells part of my family's story." As Maya spoke, she found herself sharing details she had never told anyone outside her family. She explained how her grandfather had served in Vietnam, how her grandmother had worked 3 jobs to support the family while he was deployed, and how they had immigrated from Mexico with nothing but hope and determination. The other squadmates listened intently as Maya described each element of her tattoo design. The eagle soaring over mountain peaks represented her grandfather's strength and the journey her family had taken to build a better life. Delicate vines connected different symbols, representing how family bonds grow stronger through shared struggles and triumphs. "The artist who did the work is like a second father to me," Maya continued, her voice growing more confident as she saw the genuine interest in her squadmates' faces. "He's been documenting family histories in ink for over 30 years. Every symbol, every color, every line has meaning. It took us almost 2 years to plan the entire design before we even started the actual tattooing process." Jessica shook her head in disbelief. "Maya, we thought you were this straight-laced person who never took any risks. But planning and getting a back piece that size, that detailed, that's actually incredibly brave, and expensive and time-consuming, and wow, we really had you all wrong, didn't we?" The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of missed opportunities and misunderstandings. Maya could see her squad mates processing this new information, trying to reconcile the person they thought they knew with the complex individual sitting in front of them. Sarah broke the thoughtful silence. "Why didn't you trust us enough to show us? I mean, we've been living together for over a month. We've seen each other at our worst, covered in mud and exhausted and homesick. What made you think we would judge you for having beautiful artwork on your body?" The question hit Maya harder than any of the previous teasing had. She realized that her efforts to protect herself from judgment had actually created the very isolation and criticism she had been trying to avoid. By hiding parts of herself, she had presented an incomplete picture that her squadmates had filled in with their own assumptions and prejudices. "I guess I was scared," Maya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Growing up, I learned that people see tattoos and make instant decisions about your character, your intelligence, your reliability. I've been turned down for jobs, treated differently by teachers, even had people cross the street to avoid me when my ink was visible. I thought if I could prove myself first through my performance, then maybe the tattoos wouldn't matter as much. The confession revealed a deeper truth about Maya's character that none of her squad mates had recognized. Her quiet determination, her focus on excellence, her reluctance to engage in casual conversation had all been protective mechanisms developed through years of facing discrimination and prejudice. One of the other recruits, Maria, who had been mostly silent throughout their training, spoke up for the first time. "You know what's crazy? We thought you were stuck up because you didn't want to hang out with us or share personal stories. We interpreted your privacy as arrogance when really you were just protecting yourself from the same kind of judgment you'd experienced before." Maya nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness at finally being understood. "I wanted to fit in with you all so badly, but I was terrified that if you knew the real me, you'd see me as just another stereotype instead of as a future soldier who could have your back in combat." Jessica reached out and gently touched the edge of Maya's tattoo, tracing one of the delicate rose petals with her finger. "Can we see the rest of it? I mean, if you're comfortable sharing it with us. Because honestly, after seeing just this part, I'm dying to see the whole piece. It sounds like it's basically a work of art that tells your whole family's story." Maya looked around at her squad mates, seeing genuine curiosity and respect in their faces instead of the dismissive expressions she had grown accustomed to. For the first time since arriving at training camp, she felt like these women might actually want to know her as a person, rather than judging her based on incomplete information. But showing them the full extent of her back tattoo would require removing her shirt, making herself completely vulnerable to their opinions and reactions. It was one thing to roll up a sleeve and reveal a shoulder piece. It was something entirely different to expose the masterpiece that covered her entire back, knowing that there would be no hiding it ever again. Maya stood up slowly, her heart racing as she made the most vulnerable decision of her military training experience. The forest around them felt sacred in that moment, like a natural cathedral where truth could be spoken without fear of judgment. Her squad mates watched quietly as she took a deep breath and reached for the hem of her torn uniform shirt. "If I show you this, there's no going back," Maya said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Once you see it, you'll understand why I've been so careful to keep it hidden. This isn't just body art to me. It's my history, my family's legacy, and everything I'm fighting to honor by being here." With deliberate movements, Maya pulled her shirt over her head, revealing the most breathtaking tattoo any of her squad mates had ever seen. The entire canvas of her back was transformed into a living story, with colors so vibrant and details so intricate that it looked like a masterpiece painting come to life on human skin. The centerpiece was a magnificent eagle with wings spread wide across her shoulder blades, its feathers rendered in such detail that they seemed to move in the dappled forest light. The eagle soared over a mountain range that stretched across her middle back, with peaks and valleys shaded to create an illusion of depth and distance that was almost three-dimensional. Woven throughout the landscape were symbols of her family's journey, each element carefully placed to tell part of their story. Delicate roses, matching the one they had glimpsed on her shoulder, bloomed along her spine, representing the women in her family who had shown strength and beauty in the face of hardship. Near her lower back, military insignia from different eras honored the men in her family who had served their adopted country with pride and distinction. Her grandfather's unit patch from Vietnam was positioned next to symbols representing her great-uncle, who had fought in World War II, and her cousin, who had served in Iraq. But perhaps most striking were the intricate vines and scrollwork that connected every element of the design, creating a unified whole that flowed across her skin like poetry written in ink. Spanish phrases were woven into the design in elegant script, honoring her heritage and the language that had been her first connection to family stories and traditions. The silence that followed was profound. Jessica, who had been so quick to criticize and dismiss Maya throughout their training, was staring with her mouth slightly open, tears forming in her eyes. Sarah forgot about her injured ankle entirely, leaning forward to take in every detail of the incredible artwork. "Oh my God, Maya," Jessica whispered, her voice filled with awe and regret. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. How could we have been so wrong about you? How could we have missed that you're carrying your entire family's story with you every single day?" Maria moved closer, studying the intricate details with the appreciation of someone who understood art and craftsmanship. "The skill level of this work is incredible. This had to take dozens of sessions. probably cost thousands of dollars and required sitting still for hours at a time while needles worked over some of the most sensitive parts of your back. That's not the behavior of someone who's afraid to take risks. Maya felt tears of relief flowing down her cheeks as her squad mates reacted with wonder and respect, instead of the judgment she had feared for so long. The artist's name is Carlos Mendoza, and he specializes in family heritage pieces. He told me that carrying your history on your skin is one of the most courageous things a person can do, because it means you can never run away from who you are or where you come from. As Maya slowly turned so her squad mates could see different angles of the artwork, she began sharing the stories behind each element. She pointed to a small hummingbird near her right shoulder blade, explaining that it represented her little sister, who had died of leukemia when Maya was 16. The bird was positioned so it appeared to be flying toward the eagle, symbolizing how her sister's spirit continued to guide and inspire her. This section here, Maya said, indicating an area of delicate lacework along her ribs, represents my grandmother's wedding dress, which she sewed by hand from fabric she saved for 2 years. She wore it when she married my grandfather before he left for his first deployment, not knowing if she would ever see him again. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as she listened to Maya's explanations. You've been carrying all of these stories with you, all of this love and history and meaning, and we made you feel like you had to hide it. We made you feel ashamed of something so beautiful and significant. I'm so sorry, Maya. We were horrible to you, and you didn't deserve any of it. The apologies came from all of her squad mates then, each woman acknowledging how their assumptions and behavior had contributed to Maya's isolation. They realized that their teasing about her supposed lack of tattoos had not only been mean-spirited, but completely wrong, missing the fact that Maya was actually the most extensively tattooed person in their entire squad. Jessica reached out tentatively, asking permission before gently tracing one of the vine designs with her finger. The detail work in these leaves is incredible. Each one is different like real plants, and the shading creates such depth. How long did it take to complete the whole piece? Almost 18 months of regular sessions, Maya replied, carefully putting her shirt back on now that the revelation was complete. Carlos worked on it every Saturday afternoon, usually for about 3 hours at a time. We would talk about my family while he worked, and sometimes he would suggest changes or additions based on stories I shared. It became like therapy, remembering and honoring people who had shaped my life. As Maya finished dressing, the dynamic of their group had shifted completely. Her squad mates were looking at her with new eyes, seeing strength and depth they had completely missed before. The quiet girl they had dismissed as boring and overly cautious was actually someone who had endured hours of pain to create a permanent tribute to her loved ones. Someone who had saved money for years to commission museum-quality artwork. Someone who carried the weight of family expectations and dreams with grace and determination. The conversation that followed was different from any they had shared during their weeks of training together. For the first time, Maya felt comfortable sharing details about her childhood, her motivations for joining the military, and her hopes for the future. Her squad mates, in turn, opened up about their own insecurities and the assumptions they had made about each other. But even as they bonded over this newfound understanding, they all knew that their immediate challenge remained unchanged. Sarah was still injured. They were still miles from base camp, and they needed to work together as a team to get everyone back safely. The difference was that now they truly were a team, united by trust and respect rather than divided by misunderstandings and prejudice. As they prepared to resume their journey, Maya realized that revealing her tattoos had done more than just correct her squad mates' wrong assumptions. It had freed her from the exhausting burden of constantly hiding parts of herself, and it had shown her that sometimes taking the biggest risks leads to the greatest rewards. The journey back to base camp transformed from a grim rescue mission into something that felt almost like a pilgrimage. Maya's revelation had broken down the walls between the squad mates, and now they worked together with a coordination and mutual respect they had never achieved during their weeks of formal training exercises. Sarah, despite her pain, found herself able to endure the trek much better now that she felt truly supported by her team. The other women took turns helping her navigate difficult terrain, and Maya used her knowledge of pressure points and pain management techniques to help reduce Sarah's discomfort during their rest stops. As they made their way through the forest, conversation flowed more naturally than it ever had before. Jessica shared her own story of growing up in a military family explaining how the pressure to live up to her father's expectations had made her defensive and sometimes aggressive toward others. Maria talked about her struggles with feeling invisible and overlooked, which had contributed to her silence during group activities. Maya found herself opening up about experiences she had never shared with anyone outside her family. She told them about the discrimination she had faced when applying for jobs, how some employers would seem enthusiastic during phone interviews, but change their attitude completely when they met her in person and noticed her tattoos. She described the careful strategies she had developed for dressing professionally, always wearing long sleeves and high necklines to ensure her artwork remained hidden during important meetings. The worst part wasn't even the rejection, Maya explained as they navigated around a fallen tree. It was the way people would look at me differently once they saw the ink. Like suddenly I wasn't smart enough or trustworthy enough, even though nothing about my qualifications or character had actually changed. Her squad mates listened with growing understanding, realizing how their own initial reactions had contributed to the same kind of prejudice Maya had faced throughout her life. They began to see her quiet confidence and professional demeanor, not as arrogance but as armor she had developed to protect herself in a world that often judged her unfairly. When they reached the halfway point of their journey, Maya suggested they take an extended rest to reassess Sarah's condition and adjust their strategy if needed. As Sarah elevated her injured ankle and applied fresh cold compresses, the other women gathered around to continue their conversation. "Can I ask you something?" Jessica said, her voice tentative. "When you first arrived at training camp and we started making those comments about tattoos, did you want to tell us we were wrong? It must have been so frustrating to listen to us talk about how boring and safe you were when you knew the truth." Maya considered the question carefully before responding. "At first I was angry. I wanted to prove you wrong, but I was also scared that showing you my tattoos would just create different problems. I've learned that some people see extensive body art and assume you're rebellious, unprofessional, or trying to make some kind of statement. I didn't want to trade one set of wrong assumptions for another. But we made you feel isolated and excluded," Sarah said from her position on the makeshift stretcher. "Our ignorance hurt you, and you suffered in silence rather than correcting us. That's not fair, and it's not the kind of team environment we should have been creating." As they resumed their trek, Maya noticed something remarkable happening. Her squad mates were not only accepting her for who she really was, but they were also examining their own behavior and biases with honest self-reflection. The conversations that flowed between them as they walked were deeper and more meaningful than anything they had shared during weeks of living together in close quarters. About an hour before sunset, they encountered their most challenging obstacle yet. A recent storm had brought down a massive tree across their path, creating a barrier that was too high to climb over and too wide to walk around easily. The fallen giant stretched between two hills, effectively blocking their route back to base camp. Maya studied the situation, her tactical training kicking in as she analyzed their options. They could attempt to find another way around, but that would add hours to their journey and risk traveling in darkness with an injured teammate. They could try to climb over the tree, but that would be dangerous for Sarah and potentially impossible given her mobility limitations. Then Maya noticed something the others had missed. The massive root system of the fallen tree had created a natural tunnel underneath the trunk, large enough for a person to crawl through if they were willing to get dirty and work carefully through the cramped space. "I think we can get under it," Maya announced, pointing to the root tunnel. "It'll be tight and muddy, but it's definitely passable. We'll need to pass our gear through first, then help Sarah crawl through with support on both sides." Jessica immediately volunteered to go first, eager to prove her commitment to the team and her trust in Maya's leadership. She army crawled through the muddy passage, emerging on the other side covered in dirt but grinning with accomplishment. One by one, the other squad mates followed, passing equipment and supplies through the narrow space. When it came time for Sarah to navigate the tunnel, Maya positioned herself at the entrance while Jessica waited on the other side. Together they guided Sarah through the passage, supporting her injured leg and offering encouragement every inch of the way. As Sarah emerged from the tunnel, muddy but triumphant, she looked up at Maya with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on us even when we didn't deserve your help. You could have let us fail this exercise as punishment for how we treated you, but instead you're getting us home safe." Maya helped Sarah to her feet, adjusting the makeshift stretcher for the final leg of their journey. "We're a squad," she said simply. "That means we succeed together or we fail together. Everything else is just noise." The sun was setting as they crested the final hill and saw base camp spread out below them. Lights were beginning to come on in the various buildings, and they could see other training groups gathered around evening meal preparations. They had made it back safely as a team, with everyone accounted for and Sarah's injury properly managed throughout the challenging journey. But more importantly, they had discovered something valuable about leadership, teamwork, and the danger of making assumptions about people based on surface impressions. Maya had proven herself as a natural leader under pressure, while her squad mates had learned to look beyond their preconceived notions and appreciate the depth and complexity of someone they had completely misjudged. As they made their way down the hill toward base camp, Maya realized that this experience had changed her too. She had learned that sometimes hiding parts of yourself doesn't protect you from judgment. It just delays it while creating barriers that prevent genuine connection and understanding. The risk of vulnerability had been scary, but the reward of authentic relationships and mutual respect had made it worthwhile. None of them knew it yet, but their dramatic arrival back at base camp would attract the attention of their commanding officers and set in motion events that would test their newfound unity in ways they never could have imagined. Sergeant Williams was waiting at the edge of base camp when Squad Delta finally emerged from the forest, supporting Sarah between them as they made their way down the hill. The commanding officer's expression was unreadable, but Maya could see, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of their appearance, their formation, and the way they moved together as a coordinated unit. Other training squads had gathered to watch their arrival, curious about why Delta Squad was returning so late, and why one of their members was clearly injured. Maya felt a familiar flutter of anxiety as she realized they would now have to explain their decisions and actions to their superior officers, not knowing whether their choice to handle the emergency themselves would be seen as initiative or insubordination. "Squad Delta, report to the medical station immediately," Sergeant Williams commanded, her voice crisp and professional. "Rodriguez, I want to see you in my office after the medics have examined your teammate." As they helped Sarah to the medical facility, Maya's squad mates offered quiet words of support and encouragement. Jessica squeezed her shoulder and whispered, "Whatever happens, we're with you. You saved us out there and we won't let anyone forget that." The base medic, an experienced corpsman named Peterson, examined Sarah's ankle with gentle efficiency. He confirmed Maya's field assessment that the injury was a severe sprain rather than a break, and praised the quality of first aid treatment Sarah had received in the wilderness. The proper wrapping and cold water treatments had prevented the injury from becoming much worse. "Whoever treated this injury in the field knew what they were doing," Peterson commented as he prepared a proper ice pack and elevation support for Sarah's ankle. "Professional quality emergency care. Probably saved you from needing surgery to repair torn ligaments." As Sarah was settled into the medical station for observation, Maya made her way to Sergeant Williams' office with her heart pounding. She had no idea whether she was about to be commended for leadership under pressure or disciplined for failing to use the emergency radio when a squad mate was injured. She knocked on the door and entered when commanded, standing at attention in front of Sergeant Williams' desk. The office was sparse and functional, with military regulations posted on the walls and commendation certificates from the sergeant's own distinguished career displayed behind her chair. "At ease, Rodriguez," Sergeant Williams said, gesturing for Maya to take a seat. "Tell me what happened out there. I want a complete account of the emergency, your decision-making process, and how your squad handled the situation." Maya took a deep breath and provided a thorough briefing of the events from discovering Sarah's injury in the pre-dawn darkness to their safe arrival back at base camp. She explained her assessment of the injury, the treatment options she had considered, and her reasoning for choosing to evacuate Sarah without using the emergency radio. Throughout her report, Maya maintained military bearing and professionalism, but she also spoke with the confidence of someone who knew she had made the right decisions under difficult circumstances. She didn't make excuses for the risks they had taken, but she clearly articulated the factors that had influenced her choices. When Maya finished her account, Sergeant Williams leaned back in her chair and studied her for a long moment. "Rodriguez, You took command of a crisis situation and led your squad through a challenging evacuation without any official authority to do so. You made medical decisions that could have had serious consequences if you had been wrong. You chose to risk the safety of your entire squad rather than call for immediate professional rescue. Do you understand the gravity of the choices you made? Maya felt her stomach drop, but she maintained eye contact with her commanding officer. Yes, Sergeant. I understand that my decisions carried significant risks and responsibilities. I accept full accountability for the outcomes of those choices. Good, Sergeant Williams said, and Maya was surprised to see the hint of a smile cross her stern features. Because those were exactly the kinds of decisions I would expect from a natural leader who puts mission accomplishment and team welfare ahead of personal safety and convenience. Maya blinked in surprise, not sure she had heard correctly. Sergeant? Rodriguez, I've been watching your squad dynamics since training began. I noticed the way your teammates were excluding you, the assumptions they were making about your character, and the way you were handling their treatment with dignity and professionalism. I was waiting to see how things would resolve themselves, but I was prepared to intervene if necessary. Sergeant Williams stood up and walked around her desk, leaning against the front edge as she continued speaking. What happened out there in the wilderness wasn't just a medical emergency, Rodriguez. It was a test of character, leadership, and team cohesion. Your squad faced a real crisis, and instead of falling apart under pressure, you came together and succeeded as a unit. My squad mates deserve most of the credit, Sergeant, Maya said, feeling compelled to share recognition. Once we started, working together as a real team, everyone stepped up and contributed to our success. That's exactly what I would expect a good leader to say, Sergeant Williams replied. Taking responsibility when things go wrong, sharing credit when things go right. Those are the qualities we look for in future officers and non-commissioned officers. The conversation that followed revealed that Sergeant Williams had been conducting her own evaluation of leadership potential throughout their training program. She had observed how different recruits responded to stress, how they treated teammates, who were different from themselves, and how they handled situations where there was no clear right answer. Your performance during this emergency, combined with your consistent professionalism throughout training, has identified you as someone we want to fast-track for leadership development, Sergeant Williams explained. There's a specialized program for recruits who show exceptional potential, and I'm recommending you for immediate consideration. Maya felt overwhelmed by the unexpected recognition and opportunity. After weeks of feeling isolated and misunderstood, she was being offered a chance to advance her military career based on the same qualities that had initially caused problems with her squad mates. There's something else we need to discuss, Sergeant Williams continued, her tone becoming more personal. I understand there was some tension in your squad related to assumptions about tattoos and personal choices. Without going into details, can you tell me how that situation has been resolved? Maya thought carefully about how to respond, wanting to be honest without betraying the private conversation she had shared with her squad mates. I think we all learned that we were making judgments based on incomplete information, Sergeant. The crisis forced us to see each other more clearly and work together more effectively. I believe those issues have been resolved. Excellent, Sergeant, Williams said, returning to her seat behind the desk. Because the leadership program I'm recommending you for will require you to work with diverse teams from different backgrounds and experiences. You'll need to be able to build trust and communication quickly, even with people who might initially misunderstand or underestimate you. As Maya prepared to leave the office, Sergeant Williams offered one final piece of advice. Rodriguez, throughout your military career, you'll encounter people who make assumptions about you based on your appearance, your background, your gender, or any number of other factors. The key is to stay focused on your mission and your values, while remaining open to the possibility that people can change their minds when presented with new information. Maya saluted and left the office with her mind spinning from the unexpected turn of events. What had started as a wilderness training exercise had become a catalyst for personal growth, team building, and career advancement that she never could have anticipated. When she returned to the barracks, she found her squad mates waiting for her with anxious expressions. Sarah was there too, her ankle properly wrapped and supported by crutches, eager to hear the outcome of Maya's meeting with their commanding officer. Well, Jessica asked, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. Are you in trouble? Are we all in trouble? What did Sergeant Williams say? Maya looked around at the faces of women who had become real teammates and friends through their shared ordeal, and she realized that regardless of what opportunities lay ahead, the most important victory had already been won. They had learned to see beyond surface assumptions, to appreciate each other's hidden strengths, and to work together as a genuine team. She said we did exactly what she would expect from a squad that refuses to leave anyone behind, Maya replied, and the relief and pride that followed filled the barracks with celebration and laughter that could be heard throughout the base camp. The teasing was over, the assumptions had been shattered, and Maya Rodriguez had found her place not just as a soldier, but as a leader who could inspire others to look beyond the surface and discover the strength that lies beneath.